Wow, that was quick. Yo, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, maybe other places, depending on where this goes afterwards. I'm wishing you a happy 420 Eve. And here joining me is my good brother, the Donut. What's up, Donut?
Hello there. Nothing much. Today's National Bicycle Day, and then we're entering into 420 tonight. It's 420 for you, but for me, I think it's earlier. Well, no, it's not. You got a couple
No,
more
we're
hours.
going to be wrapping this. So this show, I'm glad you brought that up because this show, we are going to celebrate 420 together on 420 Eve. And for everyone listening on the East Coast, the show will end at midnight when it becomes 420. But it's a good point that it's Bicycle Day. So, and it's also Easter. So I figured it'd be a great opportunity to assemble the lads here, my brother Donut and I, were dressed professionally and ready to dispense some top tier knowledge. So thank you for joining us and stick around because we're going to be getting into some fantastic stuff. Before we do that, Donut, I know that you are sober and I respect that. And you know what? As a matter of fact, I'm going to need that tonight because I'm going to get so stoned that if you were also smoking, it would just the show would just go off the track. So you're gonna balance me out, and we're gonna go through some old world hemp history. Old
Sounds
world
good.
hemp history. What do you think of
That's-
that, Donut?
I'm really excited because looking into the secret society topic of Lumabratos and all of that goes back to the Hashashins, which were very into hashish. So I think it's an excellent topic. And a bunch
Yes,
of
and it goes
symbolism
much
too.
further. Tons of symbolism. We're gonna be, and I'm gonna need you for the symbolic breakdown. So if you see a symbol, call it out because we're gonna be going through Chris Bennett's Liber 420,
Mm.
Cannabis, Magical Herbs, and the Occult. I'm gonna share my screen. And let's get right into this. Donut, you mentioned the Hashins. I first learned about this group in the video game Assassin's Creed, but little did I know they are connected to so much. Have you ever heard of the the Temple of Wisdom?
No, I have not.
So, according to an author that we're going to we'll find the excerpt right now so that we can show the audience the exact quote. But there is a author who did a lot of research on the Templars and the Freemasons, and he basically discovered that not only was there a basically like a precursor to the Freemasons, but this precursor also was the precursor to what we now think of as the Hashashins or the Assassins. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna try to just say assassins because
Well,
I'm not gonna want to say
another
once.
precursor to the Masonic lodges and Freemasonry was Francis Bacon, and not a lot of people know, but it was his name is Bacon, like he's baking the ganja. Francis was getting baked.
Right, right. Did you know that? Did you know that the term tobacco could
Mm,
be a subtle reference to bacon? Think about it. Tobacco, to bacon. Some people
mm,
have speculated that when tobacco was discovered, quote unquote, discovered by the colonists, they named it such to honor Francis Bacon because of his whole New Atlantis idea that basically inspired the colonization of the New World. All right, so I'm gonna pull out my above phone laptop here because
It's also connected to Bacchus as well.
let's not get too crazy on the connections just yet because I want to stick with what we just said. So, the Temple of Wisdom, established in Cairo at the end of the 11th century, has said to have been the first Masonic lodge. There were various levels to it through which the candidate was launched. Ultimately, he was taught to believe nothing and that it is permissible to do anything. Apostles of this incredible sect were soon diffused through all of Asia. Everywhere they would seek and adopt followers. Thus, this new impious doctrine under the name Ishmaelis acquired very great fame, and with fame power. From the number of these apostles, too, was the well-known Hassan Saba, founder of the Assassins. He became the leader of this most famous order through sword and dagger. He resided in Persia in the citadel called Alamut and ruled over 2 very large priories according to his own whim, one of them belonging to Khorassania in the east, and the other one, the western, in the mountains of Syria. He was involved with the Templars in various interactions, both in peacetime and in war, so that at first defeated by the assassins, they later became tributaries to him. So, what does that mean? Basically means that the assassins defeated the Templars, and then the Templars were pretty much brought into the hierarchy of the assassins. But have you ever heard that term before, Donut? Ishmaelis, as in like Ishmael?
Yes.
Let's get into that because I haven't, and I'm curious, what we can learn about that. And according to this book where this research comes from, the reason why he's connecting all these dots, Chris Bennett, is because all of these groups were using cannabis to facilitate a trance-like state.
Yes. Well, even the term everything is permissible is where we get Crowley, who was partaking in a lot of the mind-altering substances, is where we get do what thou will. But he stole that from the Hell's Fire Club. Well, so you got a long history of secret societies partaking in mind-altering substances and other stuff. But I did see whenever you look up the Assassin Order, which I do like all the time, I always see the Ishmaeli symbol right there on there. So I see it all the time.
And what is the Ishmaeli symbol? Can you pull that up? Is that too hard to find? Because I've never seen that before. And
yeah, I gotcha.
Tyler, shout out to my man Tyler Bowman. He's been a fan of the podcast for a hell of a long time. Happy 420, brother. And thanks for this reminder, because I did play Assassin's Creed, but I barely remember anything that they actually tell you in the game. And it says, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Wow, fascinating. I was not familiar with that. And then the land of Facade says it used to be mandatory to grow, and the founding fathers called it dry drinking. Wow, okay, I didn't know that either. Dry drinking. That's shout out Old World Micmac. Shout out Keck. You found that?
Well, yeah, I see it. It's always right here. Am I getting it wrong? Wow. Is that what you were talking about?
No, I think that is it's spelled a little differently than what is in the book, but it's the same thing. Wow. Okay, interesting.
It's a lie.
Maybe this explains why the Shriners. What are you yelling at the cat?
No, I was gonna break out my symbolism books I got to see if I could find more info on it.
Yeah, pop it out. So I'm pretty sure the Fez stop. The Fez and the the Shriners with their curvy sword, they have some pretty outright Arabic or Islamic symbolism there. So I'm going to just reference my physical copy of the book so I can figure out what page we're on over here. But yeah, I am kind of shocked, even though I've had this book for like 6 years. I'm always shocked to open it and find like little references that I didn't notice before. And I mean, it's 800 pages, so I haven't read the whole thing, but yeah, there's tons of pieces of information. And one of the biggest threads in this book is that the Old Testament and the New Testament both have references to cannabis. And what are the odds that this year, and this probably has happened before, I can't remember in my lifetime, but Easter and 420 fall on the same day this year. So kind of appropriate to get into some of Chris Bennett's work here.
Yes.
What'd you say, Donut?
Yes.
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 Yeah. So let me pull up the screen share here because that's all right. Probably better that one of us isn't reading while we're doing live stream, but no big deal. Have some patience with me, folks. This is my first live stream with the new camera here, and I think it's going smooth. We're not having any of the issues we had in the past. So, yeah. But
yes. Crowley also did a ritual with the OTO on 420. I think that's in his book.
Really? What was that?
Let me pull it up.
Well, and what we were just looking at, what we were just looking at connects to Crowley in some way. I don't know what happened to my PDF app, but it just closed, so I got to open that back up. But yeah, the other thread that connects to the assassins is Rabelais. So during the Crusades, the European crusaders would return from the Holy Land, where they were either at one point in time fighting against the assassins, and then at another point in history, paying tribute to the assassins, right? So clearly something went on there, and they in turn began trading with these people and bringing cannabis from the Holy Land, from the Middle East to Europe. And Rabelais, Paracelsus, and a couple of other people that we think of as medieval alchemists or writers, philosophers, they were in fact aware of cannabis and had several different names for it, as it was sort of taboo to talk about. It was considered witchcraft to use anything that wasn't, authorized by the church as far as healing goes. Healing had to have been, through God. Otherwise, it was the work of the devil. So anything herbs and potions were very much, not allowed in places where the church held a lot of power. So cannabis would have been, one of those banned substances that they would have had to use code words to describe. And one of those code words is Pantagruelian, which is I believe, a major part of Rabelais' book. It's even kind of in the title. Pantagruel and Gargantua, something like that, is the name of the book by Rabelais. And this is where Crowley's famous "do what thou wilt" statement comes from. In Rabelais' book, he imagines what in his time would have been the opposite of a Catholic abbey or monastery, where people were free to, indulge in the earthly pleasures and study the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Knowledge and all these things that were so far, considered forbidden in those times. So it was kind of like blasphemy. But the ironic thing is, nowadays we hear "do what thou will" and we're like, oh, that's Crowley, that's all bad. But Rabelais was getting that from Saint Alexander, I believe, and I'm gonna have to go and look this up just to be sure. But it came from a saint originally.
Hmm.
The phrase "do what thou will," and I think it was "do what thou will under God." So essentially saying like you don't need to have a relationship with the church to know God or to know Christ. You can do it on your own, however you please, as long as, whatever, right? I think a lot of modern day Christians would probably agree with that today, and some might not. But what do you think of that, Donut?
Interesting. Well, just on Crowley and the 420, he wrote Liber Aleph on 420, the Book of Wisdom or Folly as well. But that's all new info that you're talking about, that I didn't know. I
Well,
think that's
and
interesting. That,
that,
that whole that you do what like that will in a spirituality sense. I never even looked at it in that perspective. Very
well, and
interesting.
to that point you just brought up about Crowley's book 420, he definitely was smoking hemp. It was not his favorite drug. I think he preferred opium, but he definitely smoked hash and wrote about it. I think he even has a poem with like the word hash smoker or hash eater in it. But
Hmm.
what you just said, wisdom or folly. That's kind of like, from my experience, what happens to people when they smoke weed. They either use it wisely, and in turn it shares some sort of insight with them, and that's different for everybody. And some people might say, oh well, it's just getting you in touch with your subconscious. So if that's the case, then everybody's inner truth or insight might be different. I don't know. I think cannabis is maybe the tree of life, in the sense that it allows us to connect to the Akashic records. I know that's a loaded statement, and people are like, "Oh, Mark's crazy." I'm used to it. I do think that cannabis for me has guided me in a certain direction. It's definitely not a crutch though, because it can be an obstacle. Um, when studying, if I smoke too much, my brain just goes, which might happen during this live stream. So look forward to that, folks. But anyways, I'm gonna find the passage that we were just at, and yeah, I have refrained from commenting on Aleister Crowley for quite a while because of my famous tinfoil hat blow up episode, where pretty much everybody either hated me or liked me. I don't think many people like that episode. I don't want to even portray it unfairly, but yeah, a lot of people did not like my dive
Why was that?
into Crowley. I think because I gave him the benefit of the doubt of saying like, well, if it wasn't for Crowley, we would probably have less of an idea of all of these occult practices. Like the one good thing, and this is me rephrasing it diplomatically after many years of thinking about it, but in a more or less haphazard way. I was trying to explain that, like, Crowley kind of, through his own narcissism, gave us all a peek into this very secret world that otherwise we probably wouldn't know much about. So, like, all the people who hate Crowley at the same time owe him kind of like a little bit of a thank you, if you will,
Well,
because like of all of the things he revealed. Does that
I'll be
make
right back.
sense?
Yes, yes, I got something to say on it. My cat's meowing at the door.
Get the cat, don't worry. Sam crashing out. Yeah, Sam and I, we have a tumultuous relationship at times, but I love him and he says he loves me. It's a brotherly love, the way you'd love Christ, I guess. So, anyways, oh, he's
Well,
back.
when you
What's
what
your
yeah, it's funny because if you say something, how dare you go against the narrative of the crowd? If the entire crowd is like, no, you can't say anything good. You have to say everything bad. You say anything good, their brains break. They start freaking out.
Well, here's the thing. There's a whole contingency of people that love Crowley and don't see that in his life. And, you know, they'll go on podcasts and talk about all the good things about Crowley, and if there are any. And they listen to like a podcast that, like, you know, we would be on, where we say Crowley's doing this and that, and he summoned this demon, and they just kind of laugh like, yeah. No, exactly. But that's the weird thing about the people who are like literary. Right. No, I know, but I'm saying like the people who are literary fans of Crowley, they don't consider that real, which is ironic because they love Crowley, but they don't believe his own words. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, they don't.
Yeah, I was trying to do some research for Abrahadabra, which is 418, and then like you look at his work and it's just like all these different numbers and symbols, and I just it looked crazy and it gave me a headache. And then I tried to listen to a podcast of people that follow his writings as like religious, and I'm just like, oh, it gave me a headache looking at the stuff. But he summoned a demon on 420 in Shanghai. He met this lady Simsim, who was, her last name was Simsim, her code name was Faithful, and he met her in Shanghai on 420 and summoned a demon, and they were both part of the OTO, but she, I believe, was banished like he was because she was a vampire or something like that.
Well, here's the thing. Remember When Love Won has a point. Don't read that book. I don't know which book she's talking about. I assume she means one of the Crowley books. Crowley, think about it like this. Like, nowadays we think of books like, oh, I have something to say. I'm going to write a book. I learned a lot. I researched a lot. So I'm going to write a book and I'm going to teach people about it, right? Like, that's generally what we think of when we think of nonfiction, right? But Crowley's books aren't necessarily nonfiction. Crowley was more like a blogger of his day or a vlogger of his day. They just didn't have video cameras and cell phones to record it, so they would record it in paper. So a lot of the stuff that you're reading as Crowley's writings are like meant to be rituals that, you know, he's recording for posterity's sake, but then also that someone can come along and repeat, God forbid, these rituals, right? So it is a little weird that, you know, the average Crowley literary fan is not really even in the mindset of believing in these things as actually true. They just read it from the point of view of like, oh, he was this, you know, daredevil, and you know what I mean? Like, they have like a materialistic sense of what occultism is.
It's interesting when you look at pop stars, Michael Jackson or whatever that is, they have themselves in costume and you never see them out of character, out of costume. Same thing with a movie. When you watch a movie and you see an actor playing Superman or someone, you never see them like on break without their makeup, just sitting there on their phone looking down or on the toilet. So there's an image that the artist portrays, the actor, and he did it to a genius creative level of his image of just being like the wickedest man ever. He was just a man, but he made himself look like he was the wickedest man through painting his own image, branding, just like Trump, right? Trump has branded him as strength and power and riches and luxury. So you never see like Trump like stressed out, like, oh man, I got to pay the bills, you know. He's always just like cool, calm, collective. And so that's what Crowley sort of did geniusly with being the most wickedest man.
Oh yeah, it was all marketing. But this is the very much largely what Crowley was basing his a lot of his ideas off of. Francois Rabelais, who one guy described him as let's see, it said it's yeah, Alphonse de Lamartine saw Rabelais as a poisonous, fetid mushroom born in the dunghill of the medieval cloister, the defrocked monk's pig who regaled himself in his dirty sty and loved to spatter his dregs on the face, manners, and language of his age. So, just like Crowley, this guy Rabelais.
Was this the
What's that?
philosopher? Was he the philosopher?
This is the guy I was describing before who wrote the book Gargantua and Pantagruel, which, again, Pantagruelian is a esoteric or code word for cannabis, according to this author. And again, like when later in this book, he does talk about Crowley and other people in Crowley's time who were using cannabis and other psychedelics in their rituals. So weed, 420, cannabis, I mean, it's all the whole, every term that we know aside from maybe cannabis has some kind of occult underpin to it, or some kind of secret story, like marijuana, right? Why do we call it marijuana? Because at a certain point in American history, as the land of facade pointed out earlier, it was very common for people to grow cannabis. And at one point in time, they kind of, I think it was the paper mills and other industries that had maybe competing interests with the hemp industry, they propagandized cannabis as, instead of hemp, marijuana. And what was that? It was associating it with immigrants from Mexico, freed slaves, and all this sort of the people, the derelicts of society, anybody who wasn't white and law abiding was considered like possibly a dodgy person and using marijuana, right? So that's just one example. But with 420, I believe there's an esoteric side of it. There's the Crowley numerology, but Crowley, he used a lot of numbers, so I'm not surprised to find him, he was kind of prolific with his writing and having each one numbered specifically. So I'm sure there's a reason why he named that one 420, and maybe it was associated with cannabis. But by the end of the conversation, hopefully it comes back to mind. There's another reason why that people think it's called 420, or why it's become associated with. Oh, it's because that's when you plant it in the ground. So, astrology, almanacs, right? They're printed so that farmers know, based on the stars at this point in the year, when you can plant, right? Because it's not going to be the same day on the calendar every year. But generally speaking, you would plant cannabis outside on 420. So that's maybe a reason why that number has come to be associated with cannabis. But there's all sorts of symbols. And yeah, Rabelais had to write in this coded language because he was a monk. And at that point in time, the Catholic Church would kill anybody who was, doing anything they thought was heretical. And he happened to translate a ton of Greek texts, which did have pagan, heretical, what they would have considered heretical ideas in them. And at a certain point in time, I don't remember where, he might have lived in what's now modern day Italy or somewhere in that region. But at that point in time, it was pretty much run by the Vatican still, I believe, or the Papal States, they might have been called. and they basically banned anyone from reading Greek, and everything had to be in Latin. So he had a reason to want to keep a lot of the stuff secret because he was writing things that were not necessarily allowed to be written about. So I don't know how interesting that is for everybody, but Rabelais was, I believe, associated in some way with Paracelsus. It's probably going to say somewhere in here. I was just reading this earlier. But it turns out that the more famous Divine Comedy by Dante was also inspired in this same vein. And Dante might have either read Rabelais or known about Rabelais' sort of psychedelic visionary abilities and turned to that himself to write the Divine Comedy, which is, allegedly a, trip to hell. But apparently there was an Islamic mystic named, where is his name? Somewhere over here. Ib el Hayim. And that's just going off my memory because I can't find his name. I think it's Ib el Hayim. He was criticized by other Muslim scholars or Islamic scholars of his day as basically just being a deranged madman. And he was like, no, I'm not a deranged madman. I'm just addicted to hash. That's literally his quote. I'm trying to find it, but he says I'm addicted to hashish, and that's why all of this stuff, seems so crazy and delusional. It's because I'm going into this trance and seeing the other world. Well, apparently this was a big inspiration for Dante. He either, wrote based off that influence or maybe even attempted to go into a, altered state of consciousness himself. And my buddy Rob, shout out to Rob. Rob says he's been on trips that have taken him to hell. Yeah, I could see that, Rob. That doesn't shock me. So yeah, what do you think so far?
Oh, it's just giving me flashbacks of my teenage years.
Well, and that's the thing, I kind of set you up as the sober guy here at the beginning of the conversation, but people know who are fans of yours that you are sober after how many years now?
I'll have 10 years sober next month.
Congratulations, rock on.
Yeah, we'll see though
yeah.
if I make it. 420 is tomorrow, so we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, and Donna, I'm sure you remember hearing this. I don't know how young you were when you smoked weed, but when you were younger, did they tell you not to smoke weed because it was a
gateway or something? No, I started smoking.
Everybody, just like the word marijuana has its, symbolic connotations. Everybody, when they think of weed, marijuana, pot, whatever, they think of the term gateway drug, right? Gateway. Isn't that a little interesting that would become the phrase, gateway drug?
Yeah, I guess interesting. Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I was doing it, it was illegal. It wasn't legalized and pushed by the world, really. I guess it was pushed because it was shortly after the Chronic 2 came out. So all the kids had the Chronic 2 in middle school. In 6th grade, everybody was getting stoned listening to that album. Yeah. Wow. And so the cult really pushed it on everybody. This is people who are opening up the Olympics, blazing. Snoop Dogg lit the damn torch wearing a Baphomet. Crowley is
Speaking of
a Baphomet. No, it's just mainstream now. Yeah.
No. I'm with you. It is mainstream. I don't know when that Snoop Dogg Olympic ceremony happened, that wasn't when we were younger. That
No,
must
that
have
just
been in the
happened
past
last
10 or
year.
15 years. Yeah, okay, I thought so. So, but it's funny you mentioned Baphomet. Baphomet was in the conspiracy news circles lately with the whole space launch, Blue Origin, and how their patch logo is basically
Yeah,
the Baphomet head upside down. I think I saw you post about that, and
yeah.
it's funny because Baphomet has his place in this history as well. That quote that I read at the beginning, as a matter of fact, is from a book called Ancient Baphomet Mysterium, something like that. But
Oh,
yeah, the Baphomet symbolism is definitely tied into this occult use of cannabis in some shape or form. And if I can
mm,
get to the right section of this really long book, we'll find it. And I gotta recommend this to the audience. Anybody who smokes weed and listens to podcasts like this, you got to pick up a copy of Chris Bennett's Liber 420. I mean, we could probably do a whole entire podcast itself, like literal, like just a podcast with multiple episodes just on this book, because there's just so much that's covered in it. And his
sure.
other books, which go into the biblical use of cannabis, which again, ironically, 420 lines up with Easter when Christ was reborn, right? This is a big part of the Easter symbolism, as Christ goes into the tomb for 3 days and then is reborn. This is, I mean, straight out of shamanism. This is a part of ancient rituals all around the world where people would be using a number of techniques taken out of body for a number of days and then returned to their body to show them that you are not your body, you are your soul, and your soul is your real consciousness and your real you. So don't ever forget that. And once you have that experience, as you might know from talking to people who've had near death experiences, and I've interviewed people who've had near death experiences, it changes you forever. And if you have a ritual ceremony to go with it, I mean, you're basically programming somebody to believe in whatever religion you tell them, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if everybody's believing in it and it's what the religion is and it's a true religion, sure. So, anyways, going back to Christ and all the symbolism with him, there's tons of it, right down to the Rosicrucians, which apparently the phrase rose at one point in time
Rose on my hat.
actually meant you're wearing the rose on your hat. Wow, look at that. Um,
I'm not a
it was
socialist.
one
It's
of
a
the code words that these alchemists use for cannabis. So instead of saying hemp or cannabis, they would call it rose. I don't
oh,
know
I didn't
why.
know that.
Yeah, I don't know why, but according to Chris Bennett in the chapter on Rosicrucians, which I could pull up in a moment, the rose cross in some ways is meant to symbolize the use of cannabis in these alchemical rituals. Now, here's the thing: they weren't smoking weed. So today, we're lighting up and inhaling. They didn't do that. People were, I believe, smoking things going back into antiquity, and burning incense was definitely a part of the.
They didn't, they were all stems and seeds back then.
Well, here's the thing: if you're putting raw cannabis plant on a fire and then inhaling that flame, like, or that
Oh,
smoke, like, it doesn't really matter if you're getting buds and all the plant matter at that point. Like, like, it's just such a huge concentrated hit that you would only take like one pull of the smoke and that's it. Like, you wouldn't be smoking it and enjoying the flavor of the smoke like you would with a joint or something. Like, that's why people smoke the flower and not seeds and stems. I mean, it all has THC in it. It's just the flower obviously tastes a lot better. But going back to the point, like, there were other ways of getting high that, like, we don't do that generally today. In some cases we do, but the main way apparently was this incense style. Back in the biblical days, they would start a fire with hot, get these coals and hot rocks really hot, and then throw a bunch of cannabis on it And here's the thing, they were inside of a tent. These
They were hot boxing.
holy, yeah, they were hotboxing. They were doing like this, what they called the tabernacle back in the Bible. And they would go
And
inside of these tabernacles.
they start like chanting like weird, like blah, 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 like weird things, kind of like when you hotbox in your car. And then the guy next to you just starts blah, 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 starts freestyling. You don't know what the heck he's saying.
That could be a part of it. I think they were praying. I don't know if it was just random, unless they were, doing like the speaking in tongues thing. But no. And then the other thing was they would cover themselves in cannabis oil with like basically like ground cannabis mixed with butter or fat or oil, and cover their body in it. And that's kind of like the most powerful way to get high, basically, is what they're saying in this book. And it would potentially, especially in somebody who had never used that before, take them out of body and allow them to have this rebirth experience. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you at once.
I totally relate to them. I would do anything to get the buzz. I would drive hours into the hood.
Well, that had an effect too, and that was more a part of what the assassins did with their drug, manipulation of their initiates. But no, this was meant to sort of bring on a religious experience, a spiritual experience, where they would be, so high they would yes, Tim, hold on, I have to just point this out.
Coachella is happening now, so these concerts are sort of a religious experience where you got Lady Gaga doing the Baphomet, everybody's, and Coachella is a fertility ritual. Coachella means I forget what it means, but it's spelt wrong. Like it's supposed to be Conchella, and it's a symbol for fertility. So like it's springtime and fertility.
Like the conch shell, you mean?
Yes.
So I just want to let Tim get this point across, because he's absolutely right. That's what we're going for here with the shirt and the tie. But I didn't even think about it, but it's definitely a part of the modern day occult rituals. They wouldn't do these super concerts without this occult symbolism in it, because that's what it's all about. It's about having like what did you call them in the past? They had them like the festivals, right? It's pretty much this idea: festivus to the gods, and the artists become like idols. But that's a different conversation.
I went through that with ICP and the gathering of the juggalos and all that. It's like the same thing.
Well, and here's the thing: if all of these people are, again, it's going back to that Crowley statement, wisdom or folly. I'm not saying that this is going to be the case for everybody, but a large majority of people who use cannabis irresponsibly are led to folly. And I think that's what some of these pop culture acts are meant to incite, is to lead people astray and get them to associate things like partying and getting drunk with smoking weed, because then it takes all that spiritual energy out of it. I mean, I don't mean to sound like, super granola crunchy hippie here, but there is still, music that's kind of spiritual, depending on who you are. And I mean, you can have a spiritual experience with any genre of music, but I think in the purest sense of the word, there is a religious way or a spiritual way to use music and use incense, use these different, legal or illegal herbs, depending on what time period and what state you're in, to facilitate a higher consciousness. Now, could that be something that is manipulated, where you get into that higher state of consciousness, but you're uneducated as to how to fully, it'd be like if I dropped you in the rainforest and told you we were going to, a theme park. Like, you'd be like, dude, I can't survive here, right? Like that's basically, I think, what's happening when you go to a concert, a modern concert. You're like overwhelmed with this, experience, and it kind of reprograms you, and maybe on this subtle subconscious level opens you up to influence by these quote unquote demonic entities. Whereas maybe in the past, they were trying to harness the relationship with these beings. Maybe it's always a lose lose scenario where no matter what you do, these entities are always going to, get one over on you. But I don't know. That hasn't been the case for me. I mean, I've had ups and downs in my life, but my use of cannabis has, in some ways, led me down a better path than I think I would have gone down. Um, Hindsight is 2020, so who knows what I'll say 20 years from now, but it definitely feels like it hasn't, led me under the spell of some sort of negative influence. But I definitely see how that can be the case with some people who aren't prepared to go into this higher state of consciousness, or maybe lower state of consciousness. But it was von Hammer Purgstall, and the book was called Mysterium Baphometus Revelation. So I finally, after all that vamping, I finally found the right page. So I'm going to share my screen again. And this was the passage I was reading before from my Above book laptop, which was sent to me by abovephone.com. Use the promo code crazy with your purchase of an Above phone, Above book, or Above tablet. Take back your digital privacy now with Above phone. Promo code crazy to save. Donut, we got to hook you up with an Above phone. Maybe we should have Hakeem on.
Well,
the
I
donut
want to,
factory.
I got something before you move on to this, what you're talking about. It is all connected spiritually as well, different plants for different spiritual purposes. And even in a journey in sobriety, if you're addicted to alcohol, for example, which alcohol, you can look into the occult symbolism in that. Like Smirnoff is the Masonic double-headed eagle, and all the brand owners of the different companies. Crowley, his family comes from a beer company. They sold beer. You look into a lot of the families of the big brands, though, there's like very Illuminati type control bloodlines, that because alcohol, I mean, destroys most of the violent acts are from alcohol and stuff like that, so it's a way to keep the society controlled as well, or pacified. If you look into Brave New World in the Soma, and we can see that today when we watch TV, and the drugs that are pushed legally, the chemical ones on the television that tell you that you will belong. So it's a belonging, like going to a concert. It's all pseudo spirituality being fed to us by these big corporations that are straight up all about control. You see it with the alcohol commercials as well, where there's a parade of people where now I belong, now I have community, although it's not reality. So it's mind control, that you will desire God in a sense, or whatever that spiritual experience is. And you won't be satisfied until you purchase the product. And this is how the advertisement agencies get everybody kind of hooked on this road. But Carl Jung, he said the only cure for, addiction, alcoholism, and all that is spiritual experience. So it's interesting that the only proven way to cure someone addicted to a substance like alcohol or anything else is through spiritual intervention. So there, it's very all connected. And how can that not be connected? The different uses of mind altering chemicals, if the only way to stop it is through a spiritual. That's the only thing that's ever been proven to work. So it is
Well,
absolutely like
there
a.
there is truth in that. Don't let what I'm about to say sound like I'm refuting what you just said, because I agree with that.
That's what
But
Carl Jung said. That's what Carl Jung said.
oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to attempt to go up against the great mind of Jung, but I've, I think many people are aware of ibogaine if they know anything about psychedelics, and ibogaine is purported to do wonders for people who are addicted to opioids. Excuse me.
And what is
Uh,
ibogaine?
ibogaine is kind of like an African version of ayahuasca, like in the sense that it it kind of gets you to purge, but it's not as transcendent or visionary as maybe ayahuasca. Obviously, I've never done ibogaine, so I don't know. I'm only reporting what I've read or heard, and I'm pretty sure it's almost like a life review. Like literally, the addicts are put into this state of mind where like their subconscious or their guardian angels pretty much are like, hey, look at what you're doing. Like what
Mm.
is it, the Ghost of Christmas Past, where he like takes Ebenezer and shows him like, hey, if you're not gonna stop being a jerk, like look at how like crappy your life will turn out. Like it's kind of like that in the form of a drug. So it's kind of magical to think that these, plants can do so much for our consciousness. I'm always skeptical because I've never done them myself, but it does
I've
seem
had
like
an experience like
yeah.
that. Yeah, I've had
Well,
an
and Graham
experience.
Hancock, everybody knows Graham Hancock. He purports that he was addicted to cannabis for decades, and then doing ayahuasca basically gave him the opportunity to free himself from that. So I'm not saying that you don't need a spiritual experience, because I think that's probably a major component of what these psychedelics do is they help people who are suffering from addiction, depression, confront the reality of their soul. And once you do that, I mean, it's very hard to continue being depressed. I think depression, addiction, they stem from, you know, some major imbalances in society, sure, but they also stem from a materialistic point of view. And I think the best proof of that is when you go to third world countries and look at people living on the fringes of society who, I don't know, by all accounts, and there's plenty of YouTube channels that, so far too many for it to be a conspiracy. They seem to be pretty happy living off the land and having very little. So I think something about our modern lifestyle and maybe being on the lower end of the class system and the higher end of the class system too, that pushes people to have these psycho maladies. But that's a different conversation. I don't know. Maybe this podcast is me taking advantage of my own psycho maladies, hence the term my family thinks I'm crazy. So I'm curious.
I'm crazy.
I'm curious, Donut. Have you ever seen the work of Hieronymus Bosch?
No, who is this?
I think you have. If you look at his work, you might be like, "Oh yeah, I have seen this before." So I'm gonna share something for everybody to look at, not from the book we were just looking at, but in the book we were just looking at. It says that a number of researchers and authors have suggested that the visionary art of the Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch was due to the influences from his associations with certain secret heretical sects at the time and the use of drugs within these sects. It says in The Secret Heresy of Hieronymus Bosch by Linda Harris, Bosch was a member of a surviving branch of the Cathar heresy and took part of a surviving and took part in a Manichaean style ritual that involved certain sacramental preparations, aka this biblical knowledge of cannabis, because that's what the Manichaeans, which they go back to the 3rd century CE, when the things that are in the Bible were still being written for the most part. This is what they are using, these sacraments, these cannabis based sacraments, and there's a whole slew of evidence. So don't argue with me. Go and look at Chris Bennett. But when we look at Hieronymus Bosch and his art, it's like incredible what we see. And I don't know, this book, it's probably not going to work very well for YouTube, so we might have to just go to.
So I looked it up. I have seen this, and it's interesting because Travis Scott, the tragic event that happened as he's performing at Coachella like this weekend, 420. His Astral World event was like a recreation that looked just like one of this guy's paintings, where you walk into the mouth, and the Gathering of the Juggalos this year is having that same symbol. And Travis Scott was wearing a ICP t-shirt, which is very strange for the mainstream Kardashian bloodline to be wearing a Juggalo t-shirt. And now,
have you, hold on a second. You know Ill Bill, right? We talked about this before.
Ill Bill, walk around like murder, murder, kill, kill. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a sick album. Yeah, that's fairly new.
Right. So this is new, and yeah, it's great. But I'm curious. I forgot the name of this place, because this is not just like album artwork. This is an actual stone cave somewhere in Europe, and I think this is what they're modeling that after, and this might be where the Mysteries of Eleusis took place, because it's somewhere in Europe, and it would fit with a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. So yeah, maybe it says Ill Bill.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now. Wow, that you're so right. Because he would be aware of it because of all of his studies into like Bill Cooper and all that,
Oh yeah, he's not like a newbie when it comes to conspiracies. He's been talking about this stuff. So that's interesting that Coachella would use that symbol more than once, and especially after it has this, negative connection to that tragedy.
Yes, and ICP's using it now for their gathering in August.
Really? Huh. Well, let me pull up some of these paintings. So the painting that I'm referring to by Hieronymus Bosch is called the Garden of Heavenly Delights, or the Garden of Earthly Delights. I don't remember which one, but we'll find out together. No, Earthly Delights. And this painting, dude, if this guy wasn't on psychedelics, and even the author Chris Bennett, he says that it was more likely mandrake root, which apparently has some psychedelic effects, and in medieval times they would use it for Saint Anthony's fire, which was an illness that people suffered from. But I haven't heard any modern cases of Saint Anthony's fire. Maybe it has a new name. But yeah, check this out, Donut. So have I showed you this before?
No, but I have. This is okay. So even the Economist magazine 2012 edition, The World in Hell, they're sort of looks just like this. So even
What,
the Economist
this side of
magazine.
it?
No, the middle one. But like it's like a mixture of both of them. I mean, look at that, like just the detail.
Okay. Huh.
Like who can paint like
Yeah, I'm
this
trying to
now?
look and oh yeah, right. Yeah, it's crazy. This painting is incredible. And you know, I think there's a lot of truth in the old world research. At first, I was very skeptical, and that's why I named this live stream Old World Hemp, because part of me feels like maybe this was all covered up and it fits into this whole old world theory that, you know, we have these very advanced civilizations being covered up and simultaneously technologies, you know, even goods, possibly cannabis, are being taken from these places. And this could be an example of, you know, in this painting, you know, what they were depicting. This sort of chaos, which is very surreal. Obviously, I'm not saying that this is meant to be literal, that there were giant ears with knives coming out of them and things like that.
Is
But
this
it's
guy a
very
Pisces?
strange, the symbolism here, and people, I don't know, you could look that up and see what his birthday is, but yeah,
He's
that's a good
very
question. Keep in
Piscean.
mind the calendars were different. They were using lunar calendars when he was born, so it might be hard to tell exactly what his sign was, but yeah, I don't know. Again, like, this is obviously meant to be surreal, but I wonder if it's not just merely because he was taking psychedelics that he dreamt all this up. Maybe he was trying to depict something completely different. Like, you know, we have this great, obviously utopian or some kind of civilization that is much different than what we're experiencing now in this time of physical. You know, Mark Booth in his book, The Secret History of the World, says that Hieronymus Bosch is depicting basically like the Garden of Eden and the time that followed it, which then was destroyed by the flood. So this would have been the pre-flood time, possibly what we think of when we say terms like Atlantis or Lemuria. I mean, look at these structures he's depicting here. Does this look like anything you've ever seen in architecture? It definitely doesn't even look like it's really made up of parts. I mean, it looks more like a bunch of plants and mineral. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a there's a doorway. That's one thing that we could recognize as architecture, but yeah, I don't know. It's very strange, and to me, again, like, the common academic take on Hieronymus Bosch is that he was just depicting something that maybe he saw in a psychedelic trance or state of mind. I don't know about you, but that kind of looks like a ship with a man on top, almost like a boat, right? Now, who knows? Maybe this is Noah. Everybody else is partying on. And he's like, hey, the flood's coming. I'm going to hang out in this boat up here. I don't know. Just a guess, just speculating. That kind of looks, I mean, like a spaceship, but it's probably meant to be a flower of some kind. I mean, who knows? But it does seem very, uh, you know, out of this world. And, you know, what do you think, Donut? Am I
I
off
think it's a
the
lot of
am I
fun.
off
No,
the
I
edge
think it's
now?
no. I think it's a lot of fun. It's like reminds me of, is this where Waldo got his like ideas of? I really like the paintings where there's like a story being
Oh, where's
told and
Walden?
something different. I like the strawberry that was there too.
Mm.
The big strawberry.
Well, and what does this remind
Look
you
at
of?
the owl at the
To
very
me, I
bottom.
think of like, look, you have these being hugged by a naked man. Look at this person, very rude birds just setting up a berry nest on his crotch. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think of the Egyptian depictions of like bird-headed gods when I see this, like where, people and birds are seemingly fusing together right there. Look at that. And then you have a black person and a white person. This is not black in the sense of like African or black skin, but I mean, look at how dark this person is. It's almost like they're meant to represent something alchemical or like the underworld. And then you have all these like people hiding behind these animals, like they're all coming into this big party
And look
together.
at that, like
Um,
that's
but it's
funny on
very
the left. On the
what?
left, look at that with that thing that you were showing before, the red thing. The guy's like, I don't know, it's all wild stuff, yeah.
What's this on this guy's head? He's
That
got
looks
like a
like an
light bulb on his head.
looks like the alchemical beaker, where you make the homunculus in, sort of.
No.
But look at he's doing the Illuminati hand sign there at
Well,
the
and
bottom on the yoni. The guy
where?
in the water right there, he's doing the yeah, right there. He's doing
Oh shit! This right here.
yeah, he's doing the hand
He's
gesture. The
covering his package with the Illuminati inside. I don't know if I zoom in this far, we might get flagged on YouTube because this is, I mean, these are all nude people clearly, but
it's like Monty Python a
yeah,
little bit.
wow. There's a lot of strange. Look at this. This is almost like an owl-headed
Shiva
Ganesh, but it's two people
or
back to
Ganesh.
back. Yeah, or Shiva, yeah. Very strange. Yeah, I don't know, again, like, maybe the Manichaean religion is a clue as to what this means and what this is all about, but when we come over to this slide, which I think is meant to depict Adam and Eve and Christ very clearly, you also see a ton of animals, but they're not man-sized. They're seemingly normal the way we know it to be today. And here's the thing, nowadays we would read from left to right in English, but I don't think that these triptych paintings were meant to be seen that way. I think actually they were meant to be read center, then right, and then left. So that would make
Mm.
this the final scene here. So this was the pre-world, pre-flood, and then this is the destruction, seemingly. This would be like the reset, right? Like this would be okay, no more giant animals and birds the size of humans. Everything is the right size. And, there's a unicorn, there's an elephant, there's a giraffe. Like I mean, other than the unicorn, these are all pretty much animals that we know and recognize. Porcupine, a boar, some kind of mongoose or something. I mean, yeah, all normal sized birds, right? But then we're over
Yeah, this
here
is
in
like
the,
watching a Netflix
ancient
show.
times. What, me showing you this?
No, no, just looking at the painting, it's like watching a
or
show.
or just the painting itself?
The painting itself
Yeah.
is like
Oh,
you're watching a whole
yeah.
season
Oh,
of
yeah.
Netflix.
I mean, and I'm kind of puzzled as maybe we're supposed to be by it, but I'm almost certain that there was a way to read this painting. So what I mean by that is that you can actually start from A to B to C to D, and then it does tell a story, but that's kind of like the whole point of Hieronymus Bosch possibly being initiated into a secret society, which would have include him to others. How good is the connection? Are we breaking up a lot here
It
while
broke up
sharing the
just a
screen?
tad, but it's good. It's fine.
Okay. Just wanted to check. It's our first time using the new tech to live stream. So, but check this out. This reminds me of something I saw. I think it was on Oni's page, Oni Asaru, right?
Mm.
He posted something recently. Is that his name? Am I messing his name up?
No, that's it.
You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oni on his channel, I'm pretty sure he posted something about humans being cross fused with pigs
Right.
genetically in ancient times, and that's why pigs are so similar to humans. And look at this. In the Hieronymus Bosch painting, you have a man naked with something on his thigh there being I guess talked to, spoken to. It looks like the pig nun is whispering in his ear, but you have a pig nun, and I'm gonna guess this guy's meant to represent someone at a school, but that could just be my modern eyes. I mean, who knows? I don't know if they wore those square hats back then, but yeah, very strange stuff going on. Playing cards. You have a person being stabbed through the hand there. I mean, a lot of dark stuff happening in this painting. Another human hybrid type creature,
Oh,
or
wow,
maybe
that's
meant to
crazy.
be.
That's nuts.
Yeah. Oh, another human hybrid. Look at that. Rabbit man. And this is one hell of a rabbit hole. I'll write Hieronymus Bosch's name in the description of this episode so people can spell that out if it's not
I like
obvious.
how he can paint the light, how the light looks real. That's crazy.
Yeah, well,
Like the
they're,
shades.
yeah, their illustrative abilities, their ability to portray things in that day and age is incredible. And it's part of, one of the theories of like maybe this was advanced technology that was lost. Not saying that they weren't painting, like they didn't have a machine paint these, but maybe there were techniques or technologies that allowed a painter to, do something differently than what we assume now just by hand. So yeah.
Well, a lot of mind control. The arts and stuff like that is used for mind control. That's like what Jackson Pollock was doing with his crap art, where you just throw stuff at the painting, and he's like, "It's art," which was all like orchestrated by the CIA, because these images and the paintings control the minds, and now the paintings are on the TV screens and whatnot. So like it's that art's crazy good, and they've really even for example, if I produce like a video and I work really hard on it, edit it, make sure everything is artistic and awesome, it will get no views. But if I just throw something together real quickly and make it look kind of crappy, it'll go viral. So there's been some sort of dumbing down that has happened. It's, you know what I mean?
Huh. Yeah. That's strange.
Yeah.
Well, I found the part I was looking for before, and it was Ibn el Arabi, who had these disorderly visions and ravings that were instilled in him by his addiction to hashish. That's the exact quote. And he was actually a Moor in Spain. But that's apparently one of the inspirations for Dante, going back to what I said before. And we're only 9 minutes away from 420 on the East Coast. Shout out to all our brothers on the far East Coast. Old World Micmac, I think he said that 420 midnight hit an hour ago for him. So shout out to you, Old World Micmac. What were you about to say, Donut?
going back to the Hellfire Club, they were also known as the Order of the Second Circle, I believe. And that goes into Dante's Hell, the second layer of hell of Dante's 9 different layers. Something like that.
The underworld, yeah, and that's what they might have thought when they were under the trance of these psychedelics, you know, like think about it. In those days, they didn't have, you know, someone like Terence McKenna writing books about what psychedelics were. They just called these things, I mean, I think mandrake literally translates to like mandragon or dragon root or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, just there in that name, it kind of evokes the, you know, imagery of a dragon. And maybe that's why the name stuck, because people would take it for St. Anthony's fire and they would be put under, you know, this hallucinogenic spell. And, you know, with no understanding of what that was, they would maybe think they're going to the underworld. They died and then came back, right? Like this would be possibly what they would have thought. But yeah,
It was like
I think
VR for them because they didn't have Netflix and video games. So that was their.
well, and you know, funny enough, like when I was a kid and I was thinking about psychedelics, I thought it was like, you know, you take them and you would, you know, see cartoons like the way it's depicted in a movie or on television, you know, like, and it's definitely not like that. So who knows what it would have been like in a totally different state of mind. And, you know, they say the human brain evolved to a certain extent just in so many years since we've had the, you know, technology that we've had. And I don't know if that's even true, but it definitely feels like people are exposed to more chemicals and things that would make them dumber than ever. So maybe we just can't have the same experience that people would in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, if that time period even existed. I mean, according to some people, it didn't exist, and all of these guys are either lying about what time they're in or it's all been changed. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, to be honest, but that's a conversation for a different day. There's some more information about cannabis in alchemy that we can get into, but as we sort of wind up to midnight here on the East Coast, I'm going to roll up again and we'll probably end the show with a little something, but if people want to say something in the chat, I mean, I'm trying to think. Any questions, I guess? That would probably be the best, most productive thing. Do you have any questions? Now would be
yeah, I have a question. What are you looking into right now? What's like your focus?
Well, focusing right now on anything other than the podcast isn't easy, but trying to do more stuff like this. And
you
then
look
also
great. You look really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to put some stuff together and maybe write a book based on some of my New Haven research. So that's about it. But I was more asking if anybody in the chat had any questions they wanted us to answer. It could be a question for Donut. It could be a question for me. It could be a question about today's topic, cannabis in the occult, in the old
did you
world,
see Tucker
the time
Carlson and Conor McGregor took that photo op at the Ireland Lodge?
at the Freemasonic Lodge, which Freemasonry also has its role to play in this book and certainly used cannabis. You know what? That's what we'll end on. We're not going to end right at midnight unless you want to leave, Donut, which in that case, I'm still going to stick around.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, good. Because I want to, there is a chapter in here about cannabis in Freemasonry. And I feel like this is a part that even I haven't really spent too much time looking into. So, but continue. Sorry to interrupt. What happened with McGregor and
Yeah,
Totally.
it was a funny photo op. Um, that was just interesting.
Why were
The
they in the Irish Freemason Lodge? Did you look into that?
you know, I'm not sure exactly why, but it was pretty funny to see.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that either Tucker or Connor were Masons, but maybe that's just the best place for them to meet.
Yeah, so like there's what I've been looking at a lot is just the Templars and the Crusades, and that's something that has been one of my main focuses on my channel is the Knights Templar connection to the music industry. And then I'm like, oh man, I gotta learn more about the symbolism, just like everyone's posting, oh, it's a Masonic checkerboard floor. They keep saying checkerboard like they're playing checkers and not chess, you know? So it's just like, and I can't really blame them too much. It's just that I've dedicated years to learning about the Templars, and that symbol comes from the Templars, but it goes back further than the Templars, um, and seeing that symbolism and the warriors, right? The warrior monks and all the people that are like fighting this new type crusade that's being fabricated via an AI algorithm, where you got all the different religions, and then you get the spokespeople for the religion, and a lot of them are fighters. So a lot of Andrew Tate's a perfect example, for you know, where you and he posts like images of him as a Knights Templar and an assassin fighting. It's all racist, you know. At the end of the day, it's all bigotry, and it's just the divide and conquer, going back to this old Rome strategy. You know, it's just the divide and conquer. Each cult, each religion, each nationality, each sect, uh, each race as well. Right now, in the algorithms that I'm watching and communicating with people that are under this MK Ultra mind control of falling for these narratives that are being steered by the Bilderberg Committee and whatnot, they're now kind of shifting their focus from the anti-Semitism that they've been promoting so much to race now. So now we're getting more race stories, black versus white, which is the checkerboard floor. But Conor McGregor running for president, he wants to run for president. I guess that's part of the story because they have an invasion happening there. You know, just like everywhere in America, like just the open borders kind of stuff. Then we're given on a platter warriors, boxers, fighters to tell us about geopolitics and whatnot. And it just reminds me so much of Templars, Crusades, Assassin Order, through this propaganda of the television star. But the television star is now a social media influencer, you know. So it's something I've been looking into for a while. I'm really excited I get to talk to. I finished your podcast yesterday or a couple of days ago with Cerrucci, Mr. Cerrucci, and I'm happy to dive more into that. As I'm reading this book by Bill Hughes right now, on this on the Jesuits, you know. So It'd be crazy. As
Well,
that, yeah, go ahead.
according to Chris Bennett, the Templars would have used cannabis in their rituals. So, yeah, that's a big part of this. But I wanted to fast forward a little bit into more of the recent age and talk about the Masons in the 19th century and how they were at the sort of beginning of what we now think of as a movie theater type experience. Obviously, they didn't have cameras filming, nor did they have, any sort of way to display that if they did. But what they did have were these sort of picture shows. And then obviously they had the theaters as well, which would have been more of a higher price. But they had like picture shows in the sense that it would have been shadows essentially mixed in with maybe actual artwork, set design, like, and they would tell a story without the need for actors, but with like shadows and whatnot, and they'd call it the Phantasmagoria. And
Oh, really?
apparently, yeah, and apparently they were incensing the room with hemp and other herbs to induce a certain experience in the audience, right? So,
Oh,
yeah, I'm trying to
snap.
find a direct quote about this. The Rosicrucians gave out that they had been the originators of Freemasonry, that the craft was designed as a nursery for adepts. Okay, sorry. That just has to do with Rosicrucians and Freemasons, but hold on. Help me out here, Donut.
It's like a
Vamp
haunted
for me.
house. I'm looking at some
Yeah,
pictures
no, I mean, I think that's kind of where the idea comes from.
of a
So,
haunted
all right.
house. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, they would it was considered like a spook show or an apparition show, something like that. So, okay, it says, despite various attempts at distancing the Scottish Rite, it's hard not to see the influence of the style of masonry practiced by Schroepfer. Schroepfer? I don't know how to pronounce that name. Maybe I could share my screen. Have you ever seen that name before?
But
Chauffeur.
these pictures are pretty badass.
So let's see. So apparently, this has something to do with a man who was formerly a Mason, and he created something called the Phantasmagoria. And it says there are several ways to produce the ghost or apparition for the first apportment. The easiest is simply follow the suggestions in the script and have an actor covered in a shroud rise up in the coffin. More effective is to have an actor in a darkened room wearing a skeleton costume or a costume suggesting a dead body. Even more effective is to use a device known as Pepper's Ghost Machine in its simplest form. This is a large T-shaped box. The arms of the T are equal in length and are open at the ends. The actor stands at the end of one arm, and a skeleton is suspended at the end of a second arm. The end of the third arm fills a door opening in the set. The box is painted flat black inside, and there are internal lights individually controlled by dimmers. Yada, 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 yada. The actor should be costumed as Scottish Knight of St. Andrew. Huh. All right, this is becoming more confusing than it is elucidating, but I'm pretty sure what they're saying is they're trying to put on these necromantic plays involving skeletons, and
They
there's a
got some
sort of
good pictures of
necromancy.
it on Wikipedia. I was just looking at.
Oh, that's what you meant, the Phantasmagoria pictures.
Yeah.
Well, here's apparently an illustration of certain similar ritual, where it looks like a light is being projected through a skull onto a person for the purpose of an initiation, I guess. Wow. And look at that. 3 skull and bones right up there in the top corner. It's all there, folks. But yeah. What is this? This article about the Illuminati, which appears on the cover as Diabolical World Conspiracy Exposed, appears in the final issue of Teen Set under that title after the magazine changed its name to Alm. Inside the magazine, the title becomes the most sinister, evil, subversive conspiracy in the world and was allegedly authored, according to the editor, by a Sandra Glass. Before her recent fatal accident, Miss Glass was a leading expert on subversive affairs. According to Glass, a account which has flavored various stories around the order ever since in regards to the origins of the Bavarian Illuminati. The nightmarish story begins in 1090 AD in the Middle East when Hassan-e-Sabah founded the Ismailian sect or Hashashim, so called because of their use of hashish, a deadly drug derived from the killer weed marijuana. When was this written? The Hashishim were noted for their tendency to sit around talking philosophy, their peculiar lurching gait, and their innumerable foul deeds, which filled the police files of the Middle East at the time. The Illuminati surfaced next in Bavaria in 1776. Adam Weishaupt, a student of the occult, studied the teachings of Hassan-e-Sabah and grew hemp in his backyard. On February 2nd, 1776, Weishaupt achieved illumination and cried out, "Now I know why everybody's flying these days." Why? Wait, hold on. What does that mean? Flying? Don't know. What do you think of that?
Is he talking about the
Now I know why.
The Phantasmagoria where they're flying skeletons? I think the killer weed. They're just I think they're just playing on it because there were assassins that were smoking the weed. So it's like killer weed.
This is from 1969. So it could have been just the times when, they were still very scared of weed, and that's how they were talking about it in the media. But it's funny to see that he's saying, "Now I know why everybody's flying these days," as if, I don't know, astral projection, going out of body, like we were talking about before. I mean, I can't think of anything else. Definitely weren't flying. They weren't flying like in airplanes in the 1700s, or maybe they were. Who knows?
He was flying.
I doubt it, but
he was high.
Weishaupt officially founded the Ancient Illuminated Seers of Bavaria on May 1st, 1776. Their slogan was Uije Blumenkroft, flower power forever. What? Flower power? This is like, I thought that was like a hippie slogan. Maybe that's what they're saying, since this is the 60s. It's like, hey man, flower power actually goes back to the Illuminati. They attracted many illustrious members such as Goethe and Beethoven. And Goethe, I'm pretty sure he's the guy. Yeah, he wrote Faust, about Dr. Faustus, who sells his soul to the devil. That's like the first original, sell your soul to the devil story in popular media, was written by Goethe. So they're saying that basically the Illuminati used the motto eternal flower power and eternal serpent power, which refers to the Kundalini. So I don't know. That might not all be from a reliable source.
Well, it's the Illuminatus trilogy, written by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea. Sandra Glass is a pseudonym for Robert Shea, And that saying, it looks like they made that up, which was a password for the Illuminati. It was like a password for the Illuminati, but it looks like that was fabricated, but it probably is mixed in with a lot of truth, as his books were. Like, you didn't know, you're like, oh my goodness, is this real? And it's like, yeah.
Well, I mean, what are we talking about when we talk about the Rosicrucians? That's a flower, the Tudor rose. I mean, the rose is a powerful symbol, and according to this book, the Arabic alchemists considered rose to be a code word for cannabis. And going back to what you said about Aleister Crowley and wisdom or folly, I mean, that kind of duality, we see that in the rose, you know, beauty, right? But then there's also the sort of, what would you call it, the standoffish nature of the rose, where you can't exactly just grab it and appreciate it because you'll stab your hand with its thorns, right? So there's sort of a duality in the rose, just like maybe there's a duality in cannabis, and definitely a duality in this conversation here, Donut, because happy 420, folks. I am stoned, and my good friend Donut is what do they call it? Sober as a bird. So good for you, Donut.
I'm free.
Yeah. This might be a strange 420 though. I don't think I'm gonna celebrate the same way I have in the past. Because now I'm 30, and you know, you gotta grow up eventually. But great.
Oh
Bob,
no, I celebrate that.
hold on. Bob just said I look like Kip from Napoleon Dynamite. Well, here's the thing. I'm a good Catholic boy, Donut. You know, like I grew up Catholic. We celebrate Easter. And Easter comes around, you know, you can't just go and indulge in cannabis and smoke all day like you would on a normal 420. So that's why I might be a little apprehensive. I'm still going to smoke like I do every day and like I have on previous Easters, but I'm just going to have more respect for Christ this Easter. And I'm not going to get too stoned. But people are saying I look like Kip from Napoleon Dynamite, which is funny because when I was a kid, people would tell me I looked like Napoleon Dynamite from Napoleon Dynamite. So I don't know if Kip is a step up or a step down. At least Kip had a lady. I don't know. Napoleon had that weird chick that he talked to, but I don't think he had a girl, right? Did he
No,
have a girl?
but I would tell you, I went and
He had
saw.
like,
He's got groupies galore. I went to see there was this thing where you
John
could
Peter.
walk. Yeah. Well, you could see Napoleon Dynamite with Napoleon Dynamite, Pedro, and all of them. It was like a thing that they did, and he had a whole line of groupies, and he looked like he knew exactly what he was doing. Like, everyone left, and then they all moved in. It was very strange.
Huh.
Yeah, he didn't want to be there, but then when the groupies showed up in the line for him, they were very, like, the security
I think
guards
he'd
brought
be
him
more
up.
appreciative inconsidering he allegedly infamously got the raw end of the deal from MTV. Do you know that? He made like basically no money from that Napoleon movie.
That's what I heard, but I don't know how true that is.
You doubt that.
I doubt it, but I have heard that.
Interesting.
But I don't
Well,
know.
this can go on and on and on all night, Donut, but we got to stop somewhere. So maybe we can end on some proof that at least Goth was knowledgeable, if not using cannabis. There is and you have you ever heard of Goth before?
The
Or the
the
Faustian
composer?
bargain?
Oh, Goth. Yes, the Faustian bargain, the deal with the devil.
Right. You've heard about this before. So in Faust, Mephistopheles, which is the name of this, I think it's the name of the demon devil person, he tells Faust, all theory, dear friend, is gray, but the golden tree of life springs evergreen. And that, according to Chris Bennett, could be a reference to cannabis. And to back that up, Goethe had a specimen of cannabis in his herbarium. And I'm about to show you guys all a picture of it. So,
maybe that's
to
why
your
it's called
point,
the
Donut,
devil's lettuce.
The devil's lettuce. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I mean, again, it calls into question what that really is. And, you know, maybe it goes back to the fallen angels giving man knowledge of all these plants and alchemy itself. And that's why it has this, you know, devilish association. I'll say again, for the record, cannabis has not seemingly led me astray. I don't feel like I've, you know, had some sort of evil influence over my life because of it. So I don't know how true that is, but it is a little shocking as somebody like myself. I'll admit I smoke a lot. So to see it related with such dark concepts, you know, another part of this book is that it says that cannabis is a Saturnian herb, which, you know,
Well,
Saturn's
that's
not
why,
exactly the best planet to be honored every day.
well, that's why it's called chronic,
Go
because
ahead.
chronic is named after Kronos. Kronos is Saturn, and
Pro.
Saturn is the skull. So during the
Right.
chronic tour, there was a big skull with the weed leaf. So looking at the symbols, I
Right.
always thought it was Saturnian, but I didn't know it actually was.
Well, I don't know that Goethe, being German, had access to the freshest cannabis. I don't know how good it grows in Germany. I guess it probably would grow pretty good because they grow it up in Maine, but I don't know. This seeds and stems. I mean, this does not look like a really good, healthy crop of cannabis, but it's cannabis nonetheless. And
It'll do.
Goethe had it. And it goes back to like the oldest cultures, you know. That's another part of the book that we didn't really talk about is it goes back to the Bible, but it also goes back to, you know, the Vedic culture. It goes into the Scythian culture, which for the most part, they were the first people to become equestrians.
The
They
burning
tin
bush.
forever. Yeah, they used hemp rope to basically, because without rope, you know, you can ride a horse, but you can't keep it anywhere for very long unless you know, fence it in. It's a lot easier to throw a rope around it and lead it place to place, I guess, at least when you're taming it. So, yeah, that's the strange history of hemp. One of my favorite topics. There's so much to talk about. We probably only scratched the surface as usual, but like I said, folks should go and check out Liber 420 by Chris Bennett and learn more because it's a great book, 800 pages plus. Donut, thank you for joining me, brother. You're the man. It's always
Thank
great to
you.
podcast with you. You always have some very unique and interesting things to add. So, with that, tell the audience what you have coming up soon. I know you said you're talking to Johnny Cerrucci soon. Anything else you want to promote or let the audience know about as we wrap up here?
Oh, you could just find me at Donut, and that's spelled Doenut.
Thank you, Donut. And to everybody on the East Coast, happy 420. Everybody in the Central Time Zone, happy 420 in about 40 minutes. Mountain Time Zone, happy 420 in about an hour and 20 minutes. And West Coast, all my West Coast fools, happy 420 in 2 hours and 20 minutes. But until then, we're out of here. Peace out. This has been 420 Eve. with donut, and my family thinks I'm crazy. And now Donut's going to wave awkwardly as I figure out how StreamYard works.